There is this book, Kult Divinity Lost. And if you've played it or just cracked it open and let your eyes wander past the art inside, which is a whole thing for itself, you know this game doesn't mess around. For that very reason, a lot of concepts from its GM guide, Beyond Darkness and Madness, can help us understand the philosophical fundamentals of horror. The book claims that horror is not a distinct literary genre, nor is it defined by specific literary styles. Some would agree, some not. Would you? And today, we're digging into what the Kult book says about forms of fear and figure out how to actually use them, how to make players feel them through their characters' stories. This chapter is called The Hierarchy of Horror, and to really understand it, we need to get a high-level overview and ask, what are the sources of horror or fear? At what level does it manifest, and in which form? We will go over each of those, and by the end, you should be left with a toolset to create a good scaffolding for any type of horror scene. Okay, so what are the sources of horror? Well, the book claims that most of our prevalent fears originate from 4 sources. First one is naturalistic fear. It is rooted in the raw physical world, the kind of fear that arises not from supernatural, but from the awareness that the world is overwhelmingly indifferent to us. Animal attacks, natural disasters, disease, even just the exposure to cold and hunger. These threats are forever beyond humanity's control, reminding us of our insignificance in the natural order. We dread nature's malicious power, yet marvel at its grandeur. The second one is paranormal fears. They come from what lies outside explanation. That doesn't mean just ghosts, although those are a part of it. It includes gods that shouldn't exist, entities that violate time or memory, curses that don't make sense. It is the moment you realize that the world might be built wrong, and no one told you. These types of stories have lived with us since the very beginning, dwelling at the edge of campfires and in our shattered memories. The third one is psychological fear. In contrast, it emerges from the inside. It's unease you feel when the hunting seems to come from within. Thoughts you can't shake, memories you'd rather not revisit, shame that doesn't wash off. We question our sanity and shun those who have lost their minds. This is the domain of the demented desires, psychotic killers, and shattered perceptions. The last one is scientific fears. They originate from the innate distrust of technology and those who wield it. These threats are both existential and physical, including biological weapons, illegal medical experiments, and sentient computers and machinery. We are fearful of these things, and we are fearful of the universe and what lies beyond our limited perception and understanding. Now, if these are the most prevalent sources of fear, how do we funnel them into the minds of our characters and ultimately players? Kult makes a clear point that regardless of source, all horror moves through 2 channels, the external and the internal. For example, internal horrors, while they're abstract, they can worm their way into us. Players like me can more easily identify with those as they are intensively personal. Through this identification, internal horrors gain more credibility and realism within the narrative. Imagine this train of thought.
A barking cough erupts nearby. These people are too close, forced into the bus like human cattle. You can feel they're infectious. Upon your skin, their sickness invades your throat and lungs. You have to get out before their diseases infect you. You have to get out. Get out now!
this type of fear, it doesn't come from anything paranormal. It literally comes from the proximity of other people, from the environment around you, and we all have the capacity to feel this type of internal panic that bypasses all logic, and I mean, a lot of us have felt it at least once or twice in our life. This is just one example of internal horror, the idea being that we have a source, naturalistic, paranormal, psychological, etc., and its horror is then either observed in the world around the character or inside one's head. But we're not done yet. Now we need to give it flavor. And there are 3 flavors of horror that Kult proposes: revulsion, terror, and dread. Let's go over them one by one. Revulsion is the most immediate and arguably the most primitive phase of fear. It is also called the gross out. This type of fear is connected to our oldest instincts, the ones that react before our thoughts kick in. So it makes us flinch when we smell the smell of rot. It makes our stomachs tighten at something that's mutilated, unnatural, filthy, wrong. And because of this, it's also the easiest kind of fear to trigger. You don't need nuance to disgust someone. A single vivid image, a sudden sharp violation of bodily boundaries, a situation that's socially or physically so obscene, all of these can provoke revulsion in seconds. This is why it's such a popular tool in body horror and any type of extreme horror. You can create an effect quickly and without explanation, and the mind and the body just know what to do. When used with care, revulsion becomes more than just a couple of images, right? It pushes players out of comfort, sure, but it highlights what we do not want to look at, or even more importantly for TTRPGs, it highlights what we don't want or are taught not to talk about. A tiny hand thrusts through the fresh loose dirt. An animal or a bird has been at its chubby digits peeling strips away to get softer morsels. Someone has stuck a makeshift grave marker above the small mound. It reads, number 8. All my examples are gonna be like this, very compared to what's in the book, but I'm really riding a very dangerous line for YouTube. Anyways, with revulsion, there is also potential for commentary. We can expose taboo and ugliness in places people aren't expecting, like in family, sexuality, or social and political norms. Now, it is always tempting for the GM to lean into the grotesque, especially in a horror setting where everything seems like you can just throw it in the game and it will just make things better. But this type of horror should serve a specific story and not distract from it. So if you're using these types of grotesque things sparingly and with focus, they will still have their effects and they will land harder. Terror is something that is raw. It's a psychological shock that you feel when you encounter something that's way beyond your understanding. Something that breaks every rule or that this reality taught you. And yeah, it could be natural, it can be paranormal, it can even be a transcendental experience. A woman stands beneath the underpass, barely visible in her white gown. As you watch, Ganid creatures emerge from the deep shadows, blunt heads nuzzling at her legs and crotch, purple tongues licking at her delicate fingers. She caresses their mottled fur, as if in reward for their attention. As this book says, there is the razor blade in your apple, the clawing rotten hand in your walls, the impossible shape standing at your window, the malformed beast walking into your headlights, violating our conceptions of normalcy. These are basically the things that violate the very framework of what your mind can accept. We see something, we don't really have experience with it, but we do recognize it as a tangible threat despite its surreal nature. But it possesses the same inherent weakness as revulsion. Over time, the unnatural becomes less alien and less frightening. Some games even try to simulate this, like Call of Cthulhu, where you have a cap on how many sanity points you can lose from a single type of paranormal being. The GM should keep the terrors in the shadows, never fully reveal them, or they will lose their shock value. Even when they are fully revealed, the encounter should be very short and very brutal.
The murmur comes again, drawing you closer to the cistern. You glance over its crumbling edge, and the shape below smiles up at you. Its face is an infected wound, weathered in grimy hair, but its grin remains untouched by decay. All pearly teeth glistening in the dark.
The ultimate level of horror is dread, which represents our primal fear of the unknown. Someone has hung plastic sheeting throughout the unfinished house. It crumples softly, moved by the weak breeze. Light filters through the opaque sheeting, outlining the house's skeletal walls. Up ahead, something indistinct and humanoid stands there, perfectly still, but definitely alive. Unlike revulsion or terror, dread isn't about the shock itself. Dread derives from suspense and the anticipation of the impending shock.
Dread is standing in the dark and realizing you're not alone.
Dread is knowing something is behind your bedroom door.
Dread is the strange lump under your skin, the gray shape in the fog, the living silence at the other end of the phone. It has no name, no shape, no clear form, only the terrible certainty that what is coming cannot be stopped. We know that the end is near, and that there is nothing that we can do about it.
The street sounds fade beneath an organic silence. All noise consumed by heavy foliage. Mossy steps lead towards the forgotten shrine, littered with decaying blossoms and leaves. A decrepit villa slums over on its side. Pregnant shadows lurk beyond its ruined doorway, swelling with malice as the daylight retreats.
Facing the vast unknown, you realize how small you really are. Your body, your mind, even your fate. And this denial of agency terrifies us to our very core. And as such, dread is an intensely personal fear, as we instinctively fill the void with our anxieties, giving them horrible shape. Whatever awaits in the shadows can never match the nightmare we envision in our heads beforehand. The GM's job, therefore, is to let the players feed their own fears, to fan the flames of doubt and suspicion.
A solitary chair sits in the middle of the hotel's long corridor. Someone has propped a mascot costume up in it. A comical wolf with bluish fur, its large head tilted to one side, offering an idiot's grin of sharp teeth. You feel something gazing out of its empty eye sockets.
When running any type of horror game or even just a session, the GMs should always return to the three main questions. What are the sources of horror or fear? At what level does it manifest? And in which form? Sometimes the answer will be just one combination: scientific, external, dread, Lovecraftian space horror. Other times you can mix multiple things together. You can use elements from revulsion, elements from terror, and elements from dread all together in one scene. It takes some practice, but...
The wooden floor quivers beneath your feet. Dozens of eyes snap open, watching you from its gnarled surface. Your heel sinks into one soft membrane, causing a loud pop. Fetid blood and humor splash over your skin, tacky and hot. The eyes flatter, as if sharing this pain around you. The house heaves, awakened by your transgression.
I really hope you enjoyed today's dive into the dark and philosophical world of Cult Divinity Lost. It is something that has been developed, thought about, and written down for years now. I know a lot of people really don't like this game, but for me, these books are so full of fantastic inspiration when it comes to horror. I really genuinely recommend everyone to check them out. If you're into horror, you can find something for yourself here. And if you're into this sort of thing, we too are working on our own game. It's a modern psychological horror tabletop RPG set in 2055 in the world of Margum that is broadly inspired by the city that we live in, which is Belgrade, Serbia. If that sounds interesting to you, you can find out more on our website, which is redmark.rs. You can check a bunch of interesting links in the description, join our Discord if you have any questions about anything that I've mentioned today. And yeah, if you like what we are doing here, consider subscribing and consider supporting us on Patreon. It really helps. Now I'm gonna try and break out of this illusion. I hope to see you on the other side. But until then, I bid you
Farewell, keepers.